continue with notes domain module. So open up your domain module. We need to add few dependencies first. So in the domain module build.gradle.kts, I'm using this dependencies closer, and within this I'm gonna use my coroutine dependency. So Kotlin next coroutine core. Sync your project. Alright, syncing is done. Delete this my class within our domain package. Now in this I'm gonna create package for our domain models and one package for my repository, and lastly we have use case. In this model I'm going to create my node data class. Name is node, and in this node we'll have first our node id, then we have email, then we have node title, of course. After that we'll have its content, type is string, then we have image URL, again type is string. Next we have timestamp, and timestamp type is string, and for this I'm using here system dot current time in millis dot to string. You can use long if you want to, but I don't want to use long for timestamp. And yeah, we have id, email, title, content, image URL, and timestamp. I think this is more than enough information for our nodes. Okay, next in our repository package I'm gonna create an interface naming nodes repository. Now in this nodes repository we're gonna create few function. So first function is used to create node in our Firebase Firestore that we'll discuss later. So we'll insert here node, and the return type of this function is flow. Make sure this flow is coming from Kotlin next coroutine.flow. In this we'll use here result unit. Next we'll use here update node. So in this update node we need to pass our image URL, type is string, next the updated node, and again this will return me result of type flow. Type of this flow is result unit. So this is for the updation. Next we have delete. So again I'm using the same approach, delete node, and in this we need to pass the node id, type is string, and it will return me a flow of type result, and within this we have unit. Next we have function which actually grep all of the nodes from our Firebase Firestore, and in this we need to pass email, because based on this email we'll filter the nodes for this specific user. And return type of this function is flow. We have here a list of nodes. Okay, so let's say if I want to fetch only one node based on the ID. So for that I'm going to create one more function naming get node, and this time I'm going to use here suspendable function. Pass the node ID, and return type of this function is result of type node. And yes, we are pretty much done with our nodes repository. So this node repository is responsible for CRUD operation. So now it's time to write its implementation. So for that, open up your data layer, and in this data layer open up your build.gradle.kts. In this we need to add few plugins. So first plugin is for our Firebase. Next we'll use Dagger and also KAPT. So Kotlin KAPT. That's it for our plugin section. Scroll down, at here at the bottom we need to add few more dependency. So first we're gonna use Firebase platform. So libs Firebase BOM. Next we're gonna use here Firebase Firestore. So implementation, instead of using authentication, this time we are using here Firestore.ktx. Duplicate it. Also we're gonna use here Firebase Storage, which is used to store our file. In our case we'll mostly deal with images, so we'll have here storage.ktx. So we have three dependency related to Firebase. Now we're gonna add one more dependency for our Dagger Hilt, which is libs Dagger Hilt. Duplicate it, change this Hilt to KAPT, and use here KAPT. One more thing, we need to connect our data layer with our domain layer. So for that, I'm using here implementation project notes domain. Sync your project. Alright, so syncing is done. Now open up your source, main, Java, and in this data, I'm gonna create here few package. First package is for our repository, and next we have one more package for my dependency injection. Now in this repository, I'm gonna create a class, and the class name is nodes repo implementation, and I'm gonna use here nodes repository. Simply press Ctrl I, override all of the methods. So first method is create node. Now in this create node, we are getting few things. We are getting here node, and one thing which I missed in this create node as a parameter was image URL. So let me add that thing for you. So scroll down in this node repository, we need to pass image URL to. Okay, so now go back to our implementation, add image URL, type is string. Now in this, we're gonna use two things: Firebase Firestore, just to store all of my information. By the way, Firebase Firestore is a NoSQLite database. That means it uses collections and documents to store our information. Next thing, what we're gonna use in here is Firebase Storage. So Firebase Storage is used to store files like image file or txt file, docx, ppt, etc. The sole purpose of this nodes repository implementation is to learn these two services of Firebase. So let's inject it. So first we need to inject our Firebase Firestore. So we have here Firebase Firestore, Firebase Firestore. Import it, and next we're gonna use here Firebase Storage. Firebase Storage, import it. Now open up your Firebase dashboard just like this. So we are going to use here its two services, right? First one is Firebase Storage and second one is Firebase Firestore. So we need to enable it. So here, as you can see in the build section, we have Firebase Firestore database, which eventually means Firebase Firestore. So click on it. Here you can see we have create database button. Simply click on it. Next, and I want to start my database journey in test mode. So I'm gonna select this radio button, start in test mode. So it will allow read and write operation for next 30 days. Simply click on this create button. So it will create a database. Okay, as you can see, a database is created successfully. Now I'm gonna open my build section, and over here you can see we have storage. So click on it and click on this get started button. Okay, so I'm gonna choose the default behavior and I'm gonna use this thing in test mode. Okay, so some error happens during the creation, so just redo all the things. Okay, so our bucket is created successfully. Cool. So I'm gonna just drag this thing in my second screen and start our journey over here. So in my nodes repository implementation, I'm gonna create a companion object. In this we have a private const val naming nodes. So this nodes will eventually represent my collection in Firebase Firestore. So now it's time to create our node. As you can see, the return type of this function is flow. That means we need to use here callback flow. And in this callback flow, I'm gonna use await close. And in front of my callback flow, I'm gonna use here return just to return my flow. Okay, so now we're gonna create two references. One reference for our Firebase Firestore, second reference for our Firebase storage. Now we're gonna create two things. First thing is actually pointing towards our Firebase Firestore collection naming nodes. Next is pointing towards our Firebase storage so that we can very easily store our images. So for that, I'm going to create here two variables. So first one is our nodes collection, which will point towards our Firebase Firestore. And I'm going to initialize this thing lazily. So in order to use it, I'm using here Firebase Firestore. We have collection naming function which will create a collection naming nodes, and if it is already present over there, so it simply return you a reference to that collection. Next we're gonna create one more private variable, image collection, and I'm gonna initialize this thing lazily. I'm using this time Firebase Storage, and in this Firebase Storage we're gonna take reference. So get reference, you need to mention the location in a form of a string. So my location is nodes. So this will return you a reference of this particular location, which is nodes. So first we'll check if our image URL is not empty. If it is the case, I'm gonna create one more image reference with the help of our image collection.child, and I'm using my node.id. so in future it's very easy for us to tick or grep the information regarding the images from our Firebase storage. Now we have our image reference, and now I'm using this image reference put my file with the help of image URL. As you can see, the requirement of put file function is URI, so I'm going to convert this thing in a form of URI. And at the end I'm using here add-on failure or success listener. So you have two listeners, but I don't like it, so instead of using here listener, I'm using await. So this looks us more synchronous and very easy to debug in future. Okay, so this will upload my image to the Firebase storage. Next we're gonna grep the information about the URL through which we can very easily render or download this image in future. So I'm using here uploaded image URL naming variable. Use your image reference, and in this we have download URL. Now in this download URL you can simply call await, and this will provide you URI. Convert this thing in a form of a string. So now we have our uploaded image URL. It's time to update our node image URL. So node, make a copy of it. We have here image URL, simply pass uploaded image URL. So now we have updated node that contains the image URL. Next we'll use our nodes collection and add my node in it, and we are pretty much done. I'm gonna use here await. By the way, if you want to use add-on success listener, add-on failure listener, it's totally up to you, but I don't like it, so I'm gonna use here await. So this will upload my node on the Firebase Firestore in a form of document. Okay, so that's it. Instead of using node, you should use your updated node, because updated node contains the information about my image URL. So we are done. So this is a case if our image URL is not empty, and if it is empty, so it's very easy. We're gonna use our node collection and add the incoming node. That's it. And at the end I'm gonna use here try send, and in this try send, as you can see, the return type of this flow is a result of unit. So I'm using here result.success and pass unit in it. Now if anything goes wrong on that scenario, we need to just wrap up this thing with try catch. So let's do it. So first we have here try, and we have here catch. So this will catch my exception, and if any exception arises, again I'm using a try send result.failure, pass my exception, which is E. And yes, we are pretty much done. Now we're gonna write implementation for our delete node. So in this delete node, first I'm gonna use here callback flow, and in this callback flow I'm using await close. Okay, and in front of my callback flow I'm using a return. So in order to delete something, first we need to find the node corresponding to this ID, and if node exists, we need to delete the image if that node contains any image from our Firebase storage, and after that we need to remove that information from our Firebase Firestore. So for that I'm going to create here query snapshot. As I told you, Firebase Firestore is a NoSQLite database, so we can very easily perform queries. So we'll use here our node collection where's equal to. So if you want to grep few information where you want few fields to be the same, then for that scenario you can use where equal to. I want to check whether this ID is equivalent to my pass ID. On that case, I'm gonna grep one information, get await. So if you check the return type of this thing is, which is query snapshot. Now in this query snapshot, we'll get all of the documents, and next we're gonna iterate one by one in each document. So this will provide us all of the note information. So I'm gonna check my image URL. Use document.getString and mention the field. So field is image URL. Now if my image URL is not empty, then on that scenario, as you can see, this sometimes comes null. So instead of using here is null or empty, I'm using here is null or blank dot not. If it is not the case, then only we're gonna remove this file from our Firebase storage. So to do that, we need to use here our image collection, and in this image collection we have child. So this child is nothing but it uses the note ID and we are passing that ID. So I'm using this ID delete it, and I'm using await just to perform this thing synchronously. So it will remove that image from our Firebase storage, and at the end I'm using this document, its reference, and delete it. So this will remove that information from our Firebase Firestore. So we need to deal here two things. First, we need to remove the image from our Firebase storage. Next, we need to remove that information from our Firebase Firestore. So these two things we need to handle within our delete node. Next, we're gonna write implementation for my get nodes function. So as you can see, return type of this function is flow that contains type list of note. So I'm using here return callback flow, and in this callback flow I'm using my notes collection, and I'm also want to write a query where equals to my field email is equivalent to the email that I'm passing in here. Next, we want to attach a snapshot listener. So this will provide us a snapshot of information after performing this query. So we have here snapshot, and next parameter is error. So if, let me make some space for you, if error is not equivalent to null, then we are getting some kind of error from the Firebase Firestore. So we simply return it. Else what we can do, we'll utilize this snapshot, and in this snapshot we'll have a function naming two objects. So it will convert that snapshot in type of note. Okay, so now we have notes. Next we're gonna check if my notes is not equivalent to null, then only we're gonna use try send and emit these notes. Okay, so what it will do, it will perform a query and give us a snapshot. This snapshot contains the information about our note. We'll simply convert this snapshot in a form of note. Now we have list of note, and at the end we are going to emit this list of notes to our callback flow. That's it. So we are pretty much done with the implementation of my notes repository for the time being. Later we'll write implementation for this get note function and update note function because it contains few complex logic. Next we're gonna use here Dagger Hilt. So in this DI I'm gonna create an object, and the object name is note data module, and I want to install this thing in my singleton component. Next we'll use here module. Now just below to it I'm gonna create a singleton provide function which will provide Firebase Firestore. Return type of this function is Firebase Firestore, and create an instance of it. Next I'm gonna create a singleton provide function which will provide Firebase Firestore. So Firebase Storage, not Firebase Firestore. So Firebase Storage, return Firebase Storage. Make sure the spelling is correct, and at the end import it. Okay, so Firebase Firestore does not have any constructor. We need to use here get instance. Next we're gonna write a function which will provide us notes repository implementation. In this we need to inject our Firebase Firestore and Firebase storage. So I'm gonna just accept this suggestion. A return type of this function is notes repository. So return your notes repo implementation. pass your Firebase Firestore and Firebase Storage. And we are pretty much done with our notes data module. Now it's time to create few use cases. For that, go to this domain module, and in this domain module use case, let's create few classes. So first class is actually used to create node use case. Next, we're gonna create a class which is used to get all node use case. And lastly, I'm going to create one more class which is delete node use case. Okay, so now it's time to write its implementation. So let's get started with create node use case. So over here we need to pass our nodes repository, and in this node repository we need to use operator function invoke. You need to pass your node, use your nodes repository dot create node. We need to pass image URL and node too, so just use here image URL as a parameter, type is string. Now simply pass it image URL and node. So this use case is done. Similarly for delete node, we need to inject our nodes repository. We have operator function invoke which take id as a parameter, and in nodes repository we have delete node, simply pass the id. Now in the get all nodes you need to inject your nodes repository, and in this we have operator function invoke. We need to pass email. Simply use your nodes repository dot get nodes, pass email. So we are done with the use cases. Now it's time to create a module which will provide all of these instances. So for that, open up your application module, and in this application module, within this di package, let's create one more object, and the object name is node domain module. So first thing first, we need to install this component within this singleton component, import it. Next, mention this is a module. Now in this we need to provide few things. So first we'll provide create node use case, and in this inject your node repository, and the return type of this function is create node use case. Import this node repository, and over here I'm using a return create node use case. Now I'm gonna simply duplicate it and just change this name from create node to delete node use case. Just copy this delete node use case, paste in here and here to import it. Now one more time I'm going to duplicate it, and this time I'm going to call this get all nodes use case. Just copy this stuff, paste in here and here to import it. Make sure this provide has @ as prefix. So we are pretty much done with this node domain module. So now we will go in our UI layer of nodes feature. So within this UI, first thing first, we need to add few plugins and dependency. For that I'm using here my Dagger plugin, and also I'm gonna use here Kotlin KAPT. Scroll down, and here at the bottom I'm gonna add dependency for my Dagger, and also its annotation processor, and use here instead of implementation KAPT. Sync your project. And one more thing, we need all of the use cases from our domain module. So to use those use cases we need connection between our modules. So for that I'm gonna use here implementation project nodes domain. Sync your project one more time. Alright, so we are good to go. Now in this source main Java, I'm gonna create an activity. By doing this, it will automatically attach all of the dependencies which we need to use composable screens. So right click new, go to here activity, gallery, choose empty activity, next, and simply click on finish. And just after that I'm gonna delete these two things, and in my Android manifest I'm gonna remove this activity because we are not going to use this. So I think this is a very good way of adding all of the composable dependencies. So I mostly use this approach. Now in this UI we have two screens. We have notes screen and we have add edit notes screen. Create a package for you and the package name is notes. We have one more package and the package name is add edit. And now we are going to create our notes view model. So right click new notes view model. This is a class and this class extend view model. Use here Hilt view model and I want to perform here constructor injection. So use here inject constructor. Make sure to import this inject. Okay, now in this constructor I'm gonna inject my use cases. So first use case is get all notes use case. Next we're gonna use here get current user use case. Now here in my init block I'm gonna use view model scope and launch a new coroutine, and on the top I'm gonna create here a private variable naming user mutable state flow. So the type of this thing is user, which is nullable. Make sure the initial value of this thing is null. This user is coming from our authentication domain model. Let me show you the build.gradle.kts. So you need to add these two things. So this will provide us all of the things which is related to nodes, and this will provide us something which is related to authentication. So in authentication we have a one use case naming get current user use case, and in our nodes view model we want to use email, and email is something which is provided or attached within our user domain model. So that's the reason why I'm injecting here get current user use case. So I'm gonna update my user. So user update get current user use case, and this will simply update my user mutable state flow. Now just below to it I'm gonna create one more variable which is private val underscore nodes, and the type of this thing is mutable state flow list of node, and initial value is empty list. Make sure to import this node which is coming from our nodes domain module. Then we have nodes in a form of a state flow that we're gonna expose it to our composables. Now we need to update these nodes. So to do that I'm gonna create a function, and the function name is get nodes, and in this get nodes I'm gonna use my get all nodes use case. I'm gonna invoke it. As you can see we need to pass email in here. Now we have information about email within our user mutable state flow. So let's use it, user.value.email or empty. Make sure this is a nullable, so use your question mark. Okay, that's it. Now on each emission we'll retrieve here a result. So this result is nothing but a list of nodes which we are retrieving from our Firebase Firestore. So we'll use here nodes update and simply pass your result, and at the end we're gonna use here launch in and launch this thing in our view model scope. So this get nodes will be called within our init, and we are pretty much done with our nodes view model. So in our nodes view model we are injecting two use case, get all nodes use case, get current user use case, because in our nodes view model we need email information, and this email information is present in our user data model, and due to that reason we need to use here get current user use case, because it eventually provides us user that contains the email information. We are using that email information triggering our get all nodes use case, which hit our Firebase Firestore and grab all of the nodes from there. Here we are done with our nodes view model. Now it is a good time to write its user interface. So for that I'm going to create a file, and the file name is nodes screen. In this file we're going to create a composable, and the composable name is note screen. Just below to it I'm going to create one more composable, and name of this thing is note screen content. Now in this node screen content, we are getting our nodes. Type of this thing is list of node. I'm gonna use here scaffold, and in this scaffold I'm gonna pass my modifier fill max size, and in this I'm using here a lazy column. This lazy column have modifier, padding, and fill max size. So in this lazy column we have here item, and in this item we'll use our nodes dot its size. Next we need to pass here key. So key is coming from our nodes, so nodes dot get pass your index, and this has key. And next we need to pass here content type. In this content type again we are getting the index. I'm using my nodes, grab the node corresponding to this index and use my id. Now within this trailing lambda again we are getting index. Okay, so now it's time to design our list item. So for that I'm gonna use here a row, and in this row we need to pass modifier. So modifier, I'm gonna take padding horizontally of 12 dp. Let me import this dp for you, and after that vertically I want to take 8 dp padding, and lastly fill max width. I want to change its background color based on the node. So node has two types. Node has shared or unshared. So if you want to share your node, you can very easily do it, because this is our one feature in this project. So to do that, go to your node domain model, and in this we're gonna need one more variable naming shared. Type is boolean and its initial value is false. Now come back to your nodes screen, and in this nodes screen I'm gonna give my list item a background color. So for that I'm gonna use here background. Import this background. We're gonna check if my nodes dot get index dot shared. So if it is shared, I'm gonna use here color green. So color green, else I'm using here color light gray. Apart from this, if you're talking about the shape, so I'm gonna use here a rounded corner shape. Make sure this is coming from Compose Foundation, 12 dp, and just after that I'm gonna use here clip, and the type is shape, rounded corner shape of 12 dp. And yes, we are pretty much done with our row. Now in this we're gonna use async image. Now async image is used to download images from URL. As we have already seen in our notes, we are using image URL. So in order to do that, we need to add coil image loading library in our UI layer. So for that, open up your build.kts, and here I'm gonna use implementation libs coil.compose. Sync your project, come back to your notes screen. Okay, so it's done. Now I'm gonna use here async image, and in place of model we're gonna use nodes.get index image URL, and in place of content description I'm gonna use null, and I'm gonna use here modifier. So this modifier has size of 60 dp, and I'm gonna give a background color would be white, and shape is circle shape, and just after this background I'm gonna use clip circle shape. Okay, so that's it for my async image. Now we're gonna create a column. So I'm using here modifier, weight is 1f. Now in this column we have two texts. So first text is used to show us the node title. Nodes get index its title, and if you're talking about the style, so style is coming from our material theme, typography, title large is great. Just below to it I want space. That's the reason why I'm using here spacer. A height of this thing is 8 dp. Just below to it I'm gonna use a new text, nodes dot get index, and I'm gonna render my content here. And my style this time is material theme dot typography body medium. And yeah, we are pretty much done with this column. And at the end I'm gonna create icon button. So this icon button is actually used to remove this note from our Firebase Firestore. So in this icon button I'm gonna use here icon. Make sure this icon has parameter image vector. So icons, import this icon, default delete, and its content description is null. Next it's tint, so I'm using here color red for that. And yes, we are done with this icon button. Now we need to transfer this icon button click event to my parent composable. So for that we'll use here on delete, and in this on delete we're gonna pass the id, and that's it. This is my lambda which we're gonna use to transfer the click event. Scroll down, and in this icon button you can use it, invoke it, nodes.get use index, and this node has id, so simply pass this id. Okay, so we need to use here on click and pair of parentheses if we want to use on delete like this. Just cut this thing, paste in here. So we are pretty much done with my list item, and if we have any UI issues we will fix it later. We're gonna use our view model. So wall view model, we'll use here Hilt view model to initialize our view model. Type of this view model is nodes view model. So Hilt view model is not available. Of course we haven't add dependency for this. So go back to your build.gradle.kts, and here I'm using implementation libs Hilt compose navigation. Sync your project and come back to your nodes screen, import it. Next I'm gonna use my nodes screen content, pass your modifier, your view model nodes. So view model nodes is, if you see, it is a state flow. So instead of just passing like this, we'll create nodes, use our view model nodes, and collect this thing in a form of state which is attached to our composable lifecycle. Next we're gonna pass this thing over here, and we need to create this delete node function within our nodes view model. So let's do that. Here we have a function, and the function name is delete node. Just pass the node id. So if you want to delete something, for that we have a separate use case. So simply inject it, delete node use case, import it. Scroll down, and here in delete node I'm gonna use delete node use case, pass the id, and if you check its return type, so it return flow. Due to that reason I'm using here on each. We have result within this, so result on success, on failure. So if you want to perform any operation after that, you can do it very easily. At the end we're gonna launch this flow within our view model scope. So yeah, that's it. We are pretty much done with our nodes screen. As you can see, we have no problem in here. Next we are going to create navigation graph for this nodes feature. So scroll up, go to your application module, and here in the navigation I'm going to create one more object, and the object name is nodes nav graph. And in this we'll use base navigation graph, implement the member function. So in this build I'm gonna use nav graph builder dot navigation. So we have to use here destinations. So for that let me create few destinations. So sealed interface dest, I'm using here serializable data object for this nested navigation graph, which is root. Again I'm gonna create a serializable data object. This is for the nodes screen. and one more serializable data class, which is for the details, or to be more specific you can call it add edit. And here we need to pass our note id. If you want to edit, we need to pass the id. Okay, so this is alright. So now here in the navigation I'm gonna use my destination dot root, and in place of start destination I'm using my notes, and within this we're gonna create our composables corresponding to this destinations. So for notes we have already created notes screen, so just simply use it, pass the modifier, import this composable. So if you check, we need to pass modifier. We have a little issue in here. Okay, so instead of using this thing in a form of route, we use this thing in a form of type. And yeah, we are pretty much done with our notes navigation graph. In future we will create our add edit notes screen, and after that we again come back here and add this one more composable for our add edit screen. Okay, so go back to your main activity, and here just use your notes navigation graph. Alright, so we need to do one more thing. So if user has already logged in, we need to directly navigate to our notes screen. So to do that, what I can do, I'm gonna do a field injection for Firebase authentication. So this Firebase authentication is not present within our application module because we haven't added dependencies. So go to your build.rel.kts, scroll down, and in here we'll use implementation lips Firebase authentication. Sync your project, go back to your main activity, and as you can see now it is available. So simply import it, scroll down, and here you can see in the navigation host we are passing our start destination by default auth navigation graph destination route. So we can use this only if user has not been logged in. So how can we check it? So for that I'm using our Firebase authentication, and in this Firebase authentication we have current user. So if current user is null, that means user doesn't logged in our application. So in that case we'll use authentication navigation graph. Otherwise we'll use notes navigation graph dot destination dot root. Alright, so we are pretty much done with the navigation stuffs. Now go back to our notes feature, and now we're gonna create add edit notes view model, and after that we will create this screen. So right click, new, create a new class, and the class name is add edit view model. So initially we're gonna write all of the function just to add note. After that we'll write all of the logic and functions to edit that note. So for that we'll use here view model. We have here Hilt view model annotation, and within this we'll use inject constructor, import this inject, and within this we're gonna use create note use case. All down. Now in this we're gonna have few mutable state flows. So first one is for the title, mutable state flow, and initial value is empty string. Title as state flow. Similarly we have content, mutable state flow, empty value. Next we have content. Okay, so make sure to use here underscore. Okay, so we have title, we have content. Next we have image URL. So image URL, mutable state flow, and initial value is empty. Next we'll have state flow corresponding to this mutable state flow. Now we have a function naming create note, which is responsible for note creation. Now I'm gonna create a new note. Simply import this note which is coming from your domain model. Specify all the remaining argument. So in place of id, what we can do, we can use here UUID, random UUID, convert this thing in a form of a string. Next we need to pass email. So we gonna grab this information from our get current user use case. So I'm using here get current user use case. So this will provide me information about my user. So private variable underscore user mutable state flow. Type of this mutable state flow is user, which is nullable. Import it, initial value is null. Scroll down. In our init block, we'll use view model scope, launch a new coroutine, and within this we will use our get current user use case and simply update our user. So user update get current user use case. Alright, so now we have our email information. So use user dot value email or empty. Now next we need to mention our title. So title value. For the content we have here content dot its value. For the image URL we'll use here image URL dot its value. For the shared we'll use here false. So we need to create one more mutable state flow which holds information about this shared. So for that, over here we have a private variable underscore naming shared mutable state flow. Initial value is false, and corresponding to this shared we have a state flow. Okay, so now instead of using this false, let's use our shared value, and timestamp is automatically generated when you create a new instance of our node. So now we're gonna create functions which is used to update all of this mutable state flow. So for that we have a function on title change. Pass your title and it will simply update your mutable state flow. Similarly, we have one function for content change. Pass your content in a form of a string, and over here simply use content update and update your content. Create one more function to update your image URL. Image URL update image URL. Similarly, create one more function just to update your on shared. So shared update shared. Alright, so we are pretty much done. So this view model currently hold all of our states, and also it is able to create a new node. So in order to create new node, we need to use our create nodes user use case, and in this we'll pass our node. If you check its argument, we need to pass two things, its image URL and node. So pass image URL, which is coming from our image URL dot value, and next thing we need to pass the node. Remember, in the create nodes use case, if you open it up, you will see we first upload image, and after that we'll grab the image URL and update our nodes corresponding to this updated image URL. So if you are using here image URL, so it won't affect. Alright, so now I'm using here on each, so this will provide me a result. So result on success data, on failure will provide us exception, and at the end we need to launch this thing on our view model scope. So what will happen when we get the success from Firebase Firestore? So on this case we can simply pop this screen and navigate back to our nodes screen. So to do that, what I'm going to do in here, I'm gonna create a UI state. So we have a data class, and the data class name is add edit UI state, and in this add edit UI state we have is loading, type is boolean, and next we have is pop back stack, type is again boolean, and initial value of both is false. Okay, so go back to your add edit view model, and at the top I'm gonna create a new UI state naming mutable state flow. So UI state mutable state flow, and its initial value is add edit UI state. We have state flow corresponding to this UI state. Okay, so scroll down, and here in the create node use case we have on start. Now in this on start we're gonna update our UI state. So add edit UI state is loading is true, and when we get back successful response, so in on success I'm gonna update my UI state with add edit UI state is loading value is false and is pop back stack is true. So on completion we're gonna update our UI state one more time. So UI state update add edit UI state, that's it. So this will create node for our application in the Firebase Firestore. Now we're gonna create our add edit screen. So for that, in this package I'm gonna create a file, and the file name is add edit screen. We'll create a composable, and the composable name is again add edit screen. Just below to this composable I'm gonna create one more composable, and this time I'm gonna give the name add edit screen content. Now within this I'm be using here scaffold, pass modifier, fill max size, we have here top bar, and in this top bar I'm gonna use top application bar. In place of title I'm gonna use a text, and it says add / edit. So this is an experimental API, so make sure to annotate your composable with experimental material 3 API. In this we'll retrieve inner padding. Alright, so this is my scaffold. Now in this scaffold I'm gonna use column, provide modifier fill max size, and in this column first thing we'll create a text, and the text is saying title. Just below to it we have our text field which will store the information of your node title. So we need to pass here two things, value and on value change. So we'll pass it later. In between them I'm gonna use here spacer to provide some space. So modifier height would be 8 dp, import this dp. Just below to this text field again I'm gonna use here spacer, modifier with height of 12 dp. Alright, so like this content will require one more thing, which is content, and that's it. Again I'm gonna use this spacer to create some space. Just below to it I'm using row, use modifier, fill max width, and make sure its vertical alignment is center vertically. Now within this I'm gonna use text which says shared. We'll use spacer, and this time use width because we are in the row. So I'm using here 8 dp. Next we have here checkbox, so user can use this checkbox to decide whether he wants to share this node or not. Okay, so import this checkbox. Make sure this is a composable. Alright, so now it's time to pass all of these things like value and on value change for title, content, and shared. So to do that, within this add edit screen content composable I'm gonna pass my title, type is string, like we have content, we have shared, and type of this thing is boolean. Now for on value change we'll use here on title change, and its parameter is string, return type of this thing is unit. So I'm gonna just duplicate this stuff. So just like title we have one for content, and lastly we have on shared change, and input of this function is boolean. So now it's time to use all of these parameters. So scroll down, in place of your text field simply pass your title, in place of your on value change you'll use here on title change. Now I'm gonna use here modifier, fill max width, Also, if you want to use your placeholder, you can do it very easily with the help of this placeholder, and it says enter node title. Alright, similarly for the content, I'll be using here content, and on content change we have here modifier, fill max width, and lastly I'm using here placeholder which says content or enter your node content. Alright, so now scroll down, and here for the checkbox I'm passing here shared, and for check change I'm passing here on shared change, which is perfectly fine. Now just below this row I'll be using this spacer just to give some space, and just below to it I want to give user an ability to upload the image. So to do that we require two things as a parameter. So first thing is of course our image URL. Type of this thing is string, and if anything changes we'll use here on image URL change. And also if user wants to add an image, we'll create trailing lambda for that, naming add image. Right, now scroll down, and here we first check. So if our image URL is empty, on that scenario I'm gonna use here an image. I'm using icon default plus, which is add, and my content description is null. Next I'm gonna use here modifier, and size of this thing is it's good to use 80dp, and I want to put this image within a box. So I'm using here box with modifier, fill max width, and height of this thing is 200 dp, and its content alignment is on the center. So alignment dot center. Now in this I'm gonna put my image. Alright, so if it is not the case, on that scenario I'll be using here async image, because on that case we have image URL and we need to show that image URL. So to do that I'm using here async image. So this async image is coming from our coil image loading library, and as you can see it automatically passes this image URL. Content description is null, and I don't want to use any kind of size in here. Instead I'm using here fill max width and the content scale. So content scale, I think inside will be better. So it's totally up to you. If you want to play it, you can play with it. Alright, so now what will happen if user click to this button or on this box? So this box is actually used to open photo picker. From there user can pick the photo. So if user click to my box, I'm gonna use add image. Okay, so we are pretty much done with it. Now make sure to use this inner padding, otherwise you will have some problem during runtime. Okay, so we didn't use this on image URL change, so let's use it, but I think it's better to deal these things in our parent composable, which is add edit screen. Now in this, first thing first, I'm going to create an instance of our view model with the help of Hilt view model. So this is add edit view model. Next I'm using here title, view model, title, collect this thing in a form of state attached to our life cycle. Next we have here content, view model, content, collect this thing. And lastly we have our shared by view model, shared, collect this thing in a form of state. And at the end we have our image URL. So collect this thing with view model, image URL in a form of state. Okay, so now when user click to this add image, as you can see over here, scroll down this place. So I want to simply open my photo picker. So in order to open photo picker, we'll use here photo picker naming variable. Remember launcher for activity result. Make sure to import it, and in between this small bracket I'll be using here activity result contract dot pick visual media. Import it. Within this trailing lambda we will retrieve the URI. So after selecting any image, it will simply provide you URI in this lambda. So now we'll simply use our add edit screen content and specify all of my remaining argument by name. So pass modifier, fill max size. Next we'll pass title, then we pass content, shared, so image URL. Next on title change, so I'm using here view model on title change. Like this, we'll use view model on content change. Similarly, we'll use view model on shared change, and lastly on image URL change. So this on image URL change I don't think we'll be using in this add edit screen content, so I'm gonna just remove it. As you can see in our edit screen content, we are not using this, so simply remove it. Okay, so lastly, if you see, we have add image, so use here add image. Remove this trailing lambda. So now in add image, we'll use our photo picker, and in this photo picker we'll use launch. As you can see, we need to pass a request, which is pick visual media request. So what it will do, as soon as user click to this add image, it will open the photo picker where user can select any photos which he might want to upload. Okay, so if it is a case, we'll retrieve the URI in here, and now we'll use our view model on image URL change. Simply pass our URI, convert this thing in a form of a string, and that's it. So it will simply update our image URL over here. Alright, so now I think add edit screen is pretty much done. So we have everything that we want, except one thing. I also want to include here padding of 12 dp horizontally, and vertically I'll be using 8 dp. Alright, so yeah, our add edit screen is done. Also I want to make this column scrollable, so to do that, here I'll be using vertical scroll, and in this you can simply pass remember scroll state. Alright, so we are pretty much done. Now I need to use this add edit screen in my notes navigation graph. So for that, just jump into your application module, and here you can see we already have notes nav graph. Now in this I'll be adding one more composable, and this time I'm using here destination.addEdit. So within this, simply use add edit screen and pass modifier. One more thing, if user successfully entered or created any note, after that we want to pop this screen. So in order to do that, I'm gonna attach pop back stack naming lambda. So this happens only when user successfully entered something or successfully edit something. So in order to judge whether the user had entered something or edit something, we'll have here UI state. So I'm using view model UI state, collect this thing in a form of state. Just below to it, I'll be using here launch effect and simply pass my UI state. So if my UI state is popback stack is true, on that scenario I'll be using popback stack function. Now go back to your nodes navigation graph, and over here simply use your popback stack, and in this we'll use nav controller popback stack, and done. Alright, so we are pretty much done with this. Now go to your authentication screen, and in this authentication screen we want to attach navigation. So when user successfully logged in or sign up themselves, we simply want to navigate from this navigation graph to nodes navigation graph. So to do that, I'm going to create a UI state, and the UI state name is auth UI state. This is a data class, and in this data class we have only one thing: navigate to nodes nav graph. This is a type of boolean, and initial value is false. Okay, so go back to your authentication view model. Here I'll be using UI state in a form of mutable state flow, and its initial value is authentication UI state. Corresponding to this, we'll have a UI state flow. Now simply scroll down. We have two functions, login and register. So here in the login, if user had successfully logged in, we'll need to update our UI state. So simply do it, and on completion we'll simply reset everything. So for that we'll use UI state update it dot copy navigate to nodes navigation graph to false. Similarly, we need to do the same thing for our register function. So if everything is successful, we'll use here true, otherwise we'll attach this on completion. Now scroll down and simply paste in here. Next, we need to check if user has successfully logged in. On that scenario, we will never show the authentication screen to our user. So to do that, we need to again go back to our main activity, and here I'll be using field injection, and I'm gonna inject my Firebase authentication. So in this Firebase authentication, we have current user information. So if Firebase authentication dot current user is equivalent to null, then we will show the authentication screen. Otherwise, we'll simply use nodes navigation graph dot destination dot root. So yes, we are done with this too. So I think we are pretty much done with everything. So let me check in my add edit screen. Okay, so this is my add edit screen. Scroll down. Okay, so in this scaffold we need to attach one more thing, which is floating action button. So when user successfully entered everything, he need to click on this floating action button to update or create a new node. So I'll be using here floating action button. We'll pass this on click, and in place of the UI I'll be using an icon. So make sure this icon that has image vector in it. Now icons default I'll be using here check, and the content description of this thing is null. Alright, so in my add edit screen content I'll be using one more thing, create node naming trailing lambda, or you can say function. Now when user click to this floating action button, I'll use create node. Scroll up, just after this add image we'll use create node, view model, create node, and yes, I think now we are pretty much done with it. Alright, so now it's time to execute this application. So before executing our application, I think I forgot one thing, and that thing is related to authentication. So scroll up, go to your authentication screen, and in this authentication screen we need to observe our UI state. So view model UI state, collect this thing in a form of state, and here I'll be using launch effect UI state. If UI state navigate to nodes nav graph is true, on that case I'll be using here a function, and the function name is navigate to nodes nav graph. I'll be using it in here. Okay, so just click on this authentication screen, go to authentication nav graph, and here you can use your nav host controller, perform navigation. We'll use here our nodes navigation graph destination, and in this destination we have our nodes. And I also want to remove everything, so pop up to 0, inclusive is true, so it will simply remove all of the previous screens. Okay, so now I'm gonna execute it. Okay, so we have successfully logged in, because in our authentication feature we have already signed up ourselves. Now we have this node, and as soon as I click on this button, we'll navigate to our add edit screen. So in this I'm gonna enter my node title, so let's call it node title, and here in the content let's call it enter content. Okay, so just click on this, it insert my node, and within a second it automatically reflect all of my changes. So let me just show you all of this information in our Firebase Firestore. So this is my Firebase Firestore, and I'm gonna just reload it. So here you can see this is my collection, and in each collection we have various kind of documents. So this is my document ID, and within this we have all my information like enter content, this is my email, note id image URL because we do not have added any image. So that's the reason why I'm getting here empty string. Next, shared is false, and this is my timestamp, and this is my note title. Now I'm gonna create one more note. Just click on it, and I will call it second note, and in the content I'm gonna call it second content. Let me see whether we have any image in this emulator or not. So just click on this. Okay, so we do not have any photos, so we need to capture few, but before that let me just save it. Okay, so we have a very little issue, and the issue is, so for the issue you need to open your notes add edit screen, which is this one. Scroll down, and here we need to check if URI is equivalent to null. On that case we'll simply return it, else we'll convert that URI into a string and update our image URL. Okay, so just re-execute it. Okay, click on this. This is my second node, content second, and I want to share this thing, and simply click on this. So this is my shared node. As you can see, second node, and the background of this thing is green because we have coded in that manner. If it is shared, then change the background color to green. Alright, so if you can see here, we have a little problem with the UI, so let's fix it first. So to do that, go to your notes screen, and in this note screen, in the lazy column items, so over here, so after fill max width, simply add here padding of 12 dp, and in between our async image and column I'm gonna attach a spacer. Modifier width of this thing is 8 dp. Okay, so re-execute it. Alright, so I think it won't work because I have attached my padding in a wrong sequence. So we need to attach this thing after this background, and now it works. Okay, so this white circle, as you can see, this is async image, but async image or image URL is empty. Due to that reason we are seeing here this circular white circle basically. Okay, so now if I click on this, let's see whether it deletes the document or not. So just click on it. Okay, so it successfully delete the information, as you can see in here. Alright, so delete is working. Now we need to check this image URL thing. So to do that, let me just open the camera and capture few of the photos. Click here. Now we have image. Select any of them. This is my image, and I'm simply click on this checkbox. Okay, so as you can see, note is created successfully. Now let me just pull up the Firebase dashboard. So this is the Firebase dashboard. This is my note. We have only 2 nodes, and this time you can see the image URL. And let me show you the image. So for that, simply open up your storage, go within this node collection, and this is our image. If you compare this name with our node ID, it's same. That means node creation is working perfectly. Now we're gonna write implementation within our nodes repository implementation for update node function and for get node function. So right now I'm standing within our nodes repository implementation, and here at the bottom we have get node. So first thing first, I want to change its return type from result node to flow result node. So go to your interface and just convert this thing in flow. Come back to our first, let's copy this return type, come back to our implementation, scroll down and just use it. Okay, now I'm using here callback flow, and in this callback flow we have await clause. Now within this callback flow I'm gonna use my nodes collection and execute a query. So field is equivalent to ID. Now this has only one value. That's the reason why I'm using here limit 1. We'll use get and await, and at the end I'm gonna convert all of my responses into note. So note class dot java, and we are interested only in the first. So I'm using here first or null, and store this information in here. So we'll check if my note is equivalent to null. In this scenario, I'll be using here try send result dot failure and pass exception, and in this exception I'm gonna say no note found. Else I'm using try send, and in this try send I'm using result dot success and simply pass my note. So that's it for our get note implementations. We are simply executing a query and then convert that result into a list of note, and we are interested only in the first item of that list. And at the end we simply use here try send to emit values based on certain condition. So now we're gonna write logic to update our nodes. So first thing first, I'll be using here return callback flow await close, and next we'll write all of the logic. So first, if my image URL is equal to node image URL, that means user does not change image. So in this case we only need to update our Firebase Firestore. So nodes collection, and we'll use here query where equals to, and simply use my node ID, put limit of 1 and fetch the information. Now this will provide me documentation, and in this documentation interested in the first one, so use here first or null. So if it is not null, we'll use its reference, so it eventually points to the document where your information been stored. Next we'll use here question mark dot operator, and as you can see we have here update. So simply use update, or you can go with set. So I usually prefer set. So in this set you can very easily pass your note. Next we need to pass here set options, and set option will use here merge, and at the end we'll use await just to update all of my information. And at the end, if it performs successfully, we'll use here try send result dot success unit. So this is a first case when user doesn't change the image. Next we need to capture two more cases. So if user updates the image, now in this situation what will happen? So we need to check if my image URL is not empty. If it is the case, that means user have changed their image, else it doesn't. So if it happens, we need to update our image. So in order to update our image, we'll use here image collection child, and as you remember we'll use our node ID as a name of our image in Firebase Storage. So simply use here node.id. So if you check the type of this thing is, so this thing give you storage reference. Simply store this reference. Okay, so now we have our image reference. Next we'll use this image reference and put a new file. So here we need to pass the new image URI. So we are getting this thing in a form of parameter. So use here image URL and convert this thing in a form of URI. Okay, so it will simply update your previous image with the new image. Okay, so after that we need to retrieve the image URL. So I'm gonna call this uploaded image URL. We'll use our image reference, and in this image reference we'll have download URL, and at the end simply use here await. So this will provide you the uploaded image URL. Next we need to update our nodes. So it's very easy, simply copy this stuff and paste in here, so it will do the pretty much same job. Next we need to update our node image URL with the uploaded image URL. So to do that I'm going to create a new variable and call this updated node.copy. In place of previous image URL we need to pass our uploaded image URL. So as you can see we have a little problem, and the problem is, okay, so this will give us a URI, but we are only interested in string. So simply convert this thing in a form of string and everything looks cool. Now copy this updated node, and instead of passing this node you can simply pass your updated node, and at the end use try send result success pass unit. Okay, So next case, if user wants to remove their existing image, so on that case we'll jump in here. So in this scenario, what we need to do? Well, first we need to take the reference. So image reference, image collection, child node.id. Next we'll use here image reference, and in this we have delete, and simply use here await. So it will simply delete that information, and after that you can simply update your node. So just copy all of these steps, paste in here. So now we have to create a new node. So to do that, we'll be using here updated node, existing node, copy image URL is equals to empty, and yes, so it will simply update our existing node. So we are done with our update node function implementation. So as you can see, it involves a little complex logics. That's the reason why I hadn't tried its implementation initially. Okay, so now it's time to use all of these things. So to do that, first we need to create use cases. So just click on this target. So we are currently standing in our data layer, and in our domain layer we need to create use cases. Just right click, create a class, and call this get node use case. In this we need to inject our nodes repository, import this node repository. We have here operator function invoke, we need to pass our id. So use your nodes repository get node, pass your id. So this is a suspendable function, as you can see. So we need to use here suspend operator function. Okay, similarly for updation, we'll create a new class, and the class name is update node use case. Now in this we'll simply inject our nodes repository, and within this we'll use operator function invoke. We need to pass image URL and node. So I'm gonna take this suggestion, import it. Make sure this node is coming from our nodes domain model. Alright, so we are pretty much done with our use cases. Now it's time to provide this thing. So go to your application nodes domain module, and over here we need to write two provides functions. So provide get node use case. Simply copy this get node use case, paste in here, and here to import it. Similarly, just duplicate it, and this time we need to use update node use case. So just copy this update node use case, paste in here, and here to import it. Alright, so we are done with this. Now scroll down, go to your add edit view model, and in here we'll inject those two use cases. So we'll have here private wall get node use case, and next we have private wall update node use case. Okay, now so here we'll create get node, and we need to pass id, of course. So we have get node use case. Let me check why it is giving. Okay, so it's suspendable function, so we need to just remove this suspend. Go to get node and remove this suspend too. Go back to the repository implementation and remove this suspend too. Okay, so come back to our add edit view model, scroll down. We have here get node use case, pass your id, and on each emission we'll get our result. So result dot on success will receive data, and in on failure case we'll retrieve the exception, and at the end I'm gonna launch this thing on our view model scope. Alright, so at the top of our view model I'm gonna create one more private variable edit node, mutable state flow. Type of this thing is node, nullable type, initial value is null. Alright, so scroll down, and here when we retrieve the information we'll use edit node and update this thing with our incoming data. Alright, so that's it for our get node. And also we need to update all of our mutable state flows, which actually holds the title, content, shared, image URL. So let's do that. Okay, so we have title, we have content, image URL, shared. So I'm gonna accept this suggestion. Alright, so this is for the get node. For the update node, we're gonna create one more function, update node, and in this we will be using our update node use case. Now in this we need to pass two things, our image URL and new node, or you can say the updated node. So let's create here node, and in this node we're gonna pass all of the information. So as you can see, it automatically suggests me all of the things, so I'm gonna simply accept it. And after that, in this update node use case, I'm gonna pass my image URL value and my node. So on each emission we'll be getting result back. So result on success will get the data, and on failure we'll get the error. And I'm gonna execute this thing on my view model scope. So if it happens, we need to simply pop back this screen, add edit screen, and go back to our nodes screen. So to do that, we'll be using UI state update it dot copy, and in this, as you can see, we have here is pop back stack. So is pop back stack to true, and also on start I'll be using here my UI state and update is loading to true, and on completion we're gonna reset it. So in the on completion state, I'm simply using my UI state update and update this thing with add edit UI state. That means reset this state. Similarly, I'm gonna do the same thing for my get node over here. Okay, so we don't need this in our results or success. In the result or success case, we need to simply just change this true to false. So copy this step, and here I'm gonna simply use false. Okay, so now I think we are pretty much done with it. It's time to use it. So for that, go back to your add edit screen, and in this add edit screen we'll get the ID. Now when we get this ID, we'll use one more launch effect, and if ID changes, if the ID is not equals to null, on that case we'll use our view model and call get node and simply pass my ID. Okay, next we need to update our node based on the floating action button click. So we need to check if it is a case of editing, then only we'll update our information. So how can we check it? So to check it, we need to use one more mutable state flow variable. So let's create it. Private val is edit. Type of this thing is mutable state flow. By the way, you can also use this edit node, but I don't prefer it. Initial value is false. We have is edit case. Is edit, convert this thing in a form of state flow. Scroll down, and as soon as you'll hit this get node, we simply need to update our is edit to true. Okay, now go back to our add edit screen, and here we need to collect that information. So is edit by view model is edit, collect this thing in a form of state, and simply pass this information to our add edit screen content. So let me create this thing. Is edit value is boolean, initial value is false, and over here we'll pass it is edit. And in our floating action button, so which is present in here, so we need to write logic. So if it is a case of is edit, we need to call different lambda, otherwise we'll be calling this create node. So cut this thing out, paste in here, we need to create one more lambda in here, which is update note. That's it. Simply use this update note. Okay, so scroll up, we have here update note. Now in this case you can simply use view model update note. Alright, so if user wants to remove the existing image, so for that we need to create a button. Okay, so this button is present just below to our async image. So modifier height is 12 dp. We have here button, and in this button we'll say remove image. Now we need to transfer this click event, but before that let me use here modifier. So modifier fill max width height of this thing is 45 dp. Next we have here on click. So this on click will eventually remove the existing image, and I'm gonna call this remove image lambda. Scroll down, over here I'm using remove image. Okay, scroll up, go to the add edit screen, and here we have remove image. View model will use on image URL change, and in place of image URI I'm gonna pass empty string. That means it was removed. Alright, so now when user click to our node list item, we need to pass information to our nav graph. So as you can see, we are already passing it, but we need to use this go to add edit node screen in our list items. So just scroll down. Over here, if user click to this row, I'm gonna add a clickable, and in this clickable we have, I don't think so we have function go to add. Okay, so we have actually go to add edit node screen, and let's use it and pass the information. So nodes dot get, pass your index dot id. Alright, so simply go to your nav graph, and we have a little problem in here, and the problem is we need to pass the id. So we'll retrieve that id in here. So it dot to route, type is destination dot add edit, and it has id, so simply pass that id. Alright, so now I'm gonna execute it to see whether it is working or not. So simply execute your application. I got few problems in my code, and I believe we need to fix it before executing our application. So the first problem which I encountered in here is image URL. So instead of passing our image URL dot value, we need to pass our edit node image URL or empty. And next, shared value. Yeah, that's it. Now I'm gonna execute my app. Alright, so app is executing. I'm gonna add one node with image. Right, so this is my node, and now I'm gonna add one more node, which is shared one. Okay, so this is my shared node. Now when I click on it, this is shared node, and I want to make it unshared. So now click on it. As you can see, now it become unshared. Similarly, I want to remove this image. So just click on this remove image and click on this check icon. It simply removes that image. Now when you click on it, you will see no image. Okay, now I want to add an image. Click check. Okay, so here you can see this is my uploaded image. So yeah, that's it. By using this approach, you can actually add or edit your node very easily. So if you want to delete it, let's see whether it is working or not. So when I click delete, we need to also remove this image. So to show you, let me just open the storage and drag this thing to my primary screen. So as you can see, we have only one image, which is this one. So now as soon as I delete it, it removes that information from my Firebase Storage. Now I'm gonna just refresh it. As you can see, it was removed. That means delete is working properly. Alright, so that's it. This is a approach of using edit note functionality in our notes screen. Alright, so now we are going to create our next feature, which is shared note feature, and over there user can see all of the notes which you might want to share across all of the user